For this video, I want to give my opinion and experiences with some plants that are commonly recommended to beginners who are new to the fish keeping hobby. A lot of the advice is given by people who are very experienced and overlook some mistakes that beginners make. I've only been keeping tropical aquariums a couple of months. I've been keeping fish since I was a child, but it was almost exclusively goldfish or sticklebacks in outdoor ponds, so hopefully I can share my mistakes so you can avoid them in your own tanks. So the first one is Limnophila Sessiliflora. I absolutely love this plant. I love the colour of it. The leaves look awesome, the stems look good, and best of all, it's a very, very fast grower, which fits perfectly with my philosophy of keeping my tanks and specifically how I manage the nitrogen cycle. It's a stem plant from Asia with a high growth rate. It says the height is 15 to 30 centimetres. In the tank that I've got that, it's about 40 days old now. I'd definitely say it's over 30 centimetres already. It grows very fast. And the plant has a low CO2 and light demand, so it's perfect for beginners who are using stock equipment like me. So here's a good example of the growth rate of Limnophilia. Day 0 on the left in my 7-gallon tank, and then day 31 on the right, and it's skyrocketed right to the surface. It's literally lapping over onto itself. Like I said, we're on about day 40, maybe 45 now. It's easily over 30 centimetres. It's not even close to that anymore. But yeah, I love this plant because I'm a big believer in the philosophy of turn ammonia into plant growth rather than nitrites or nitrates, and this plant grows so quickly it's going to be using a ton of ammonia from your water column. So next up is Bolbitis Heduelotii. No idea if I pronounced that correctly. This one is often recommended to be a medium skill level plant because it does have medium CO2 requirements. I don't use CO2 in the tank I have it in. It's growing fine. It's actually thriving and it's one of my healthiest plants in that tank. This is a rhizome plant, so you glue it onto the driftwood or a rock or something like that in your tank rather than actually pop it into the substrate, but it's very easy to do. I just use some Gorilla Glue. It does have a slow growth rate and my fish absolutely love it. My shrimp graze on it all the time. As you can see in the footage, there's one little cherry shrimp there, but usually there's 3 or 4 of them, maybe an Amano shrimp. My honey gourami are in this tank as well, and they often like to hide under it as well. I really like the dark colour and the texture, and it's great for building out a horizontal cover platform for your fish. Next up are Cryptocorynes or Cryptocorynes, depending on how you want to say it. I have various ones of these in my tanks. There's an absolute ton of them out there, as you can see here. The thing is, a lot of people say these are all easy, but if you checked the right hand marker there, some of them are actually medium difficulty. Crypt melt is also a thing. This is out of my 12-gallon tank, and they are the same crypt left and right with the arrows pointing to them, and one of them's melted right back, but it is slowly starting to grow again, and the other one kind of half melted, I guess you'd describe that as, and it's starting to grow again. This is a table of the Cryptocorynes I have in my own tank. They are split between 2 of my 3 tanks, and the top 3 there are definitely my favourite. They are the larger ones, in my opinion. They look better, but they are also easy to grow. All in all, I love crypts, and I'm definitely going to be using them again in the future. Next up is Java moss, another very, very popular plant that a lot of people recommend, and I didn't actually like it at first, but it's definitely grown on me, and I do plan to use more of it in the future. So as you can see, it's a moss from Asia with a medium growth rate. Once it's fully grown, it can get to over 10 centimeters in length, making it perfect for fry or shrimp or anything like that to hide in away from predators. And the plant also has a low light and CO2 demand. So here's the Java moss on the driftwood in my 7-gallon tank. It's literally just threaded onto it, and over the course of about 2 weeks it grew out. You can't even see the thread anymore. It's still in the tank. I haven't removed or anything like that. This is the Java moss in my 29-gallon tank, and I actually moved a lot of the shrimp from the 7-gallon into the 29-gallon to help with the algae. But you can see the shrimp at the right hand side there. The graze on this pretty much 24 hours a day. And in this tank, the Java moss is actually glued in place using the Gorilla Glue gel formula. Next up is Bucephalandra, and I have the Kedagang variant, but there are a number of different types of Bucephalandra out there. As you can see, it's another rhizome plant, so you're going to be attaching it to driftwood or rocks or something like that rather than burying it. It's from Asia, slow growth rate, maximum height for this specific variant is around 20 centimeters, and it also has a low light and CO2 demand. I have 2 of these in my 29-gallon. I really like the colours of this plant. It's a dark, deep green, and there's a little bit of red on the stem of the plant to help make the red bit pop. I really haven't had any issues with my Bucephalandra at all. It's pretty much thriving. You'll have to forgive the frozen cyclops floating around in the water. I just fed the fish when I was recording it. Due to time constraints, it's pretty much unavoidable, but yeah, you can see this one's doing very well. Next up is Java Fern, and it's another very popular plant that's commonly recommended to beginners, and I'd agree this is beginner beginner friendly. It's been very easy to use. Again, it's a rhizome plant, so you're going to be gluing it to your hardscapes or rock or your driftwood or something like that rather than burying it into the substrate. It's from Asia with a slow growth rate. There are multiple variants of Java Fern now. Most of mine are just the regular Java Fern that max out at around 30 centimeters, and it's got a low light and CO2 demand. Because of its height, this is at the back of my 29 gallon, so with the surface disturbance from the filters and stuff like that, it's a little bit of a pain to get footage of, but I have done my best, and as you can see, the regular Java Ferns are thriving in this tank. They really are. They're doing very, very well. I do have one of the skinny leaf Java Ferns. I can't remember the exact name, and it does have some black tips on its leaves, but other than that, it's been fine. They're really very, very easy to grow. As you can kind of make out there, one of my honey gourami absolutely loves this little hiding spot between these two Java Ferns, and his brother likes to hide at the other side amongst two different ones. This is how I've actually secured them. You could see it in the previous clip, but I get the little ceramic rings, I glue them on with super glue gel, and then I sink them to where I want them. Next up, we have red root floaters, and I don't think this is actually recommended as much as something like Amazon Frogbit or duckweed. I absolutely love this. Unfortunately, mine doesn't have that red tint you can see in the official photo from Tropica. I do hope it develops in the future, but mine's just pretty much green, as you'll see in the video footage in a second. But yeah, this is a floating plant from South America, medium growth rate, and its maximum height, as in root length and stuff like that, is 5 centimeters plus, and it's got a low light and CO2 demand. This is my 7-gallon tank, so it's 29 centimeters by 29 centimeters footprint, and as you can see, one single pot from the Tropica range has basically covered it in maybe 45 days. So I definitely agree that it has that medium growth rate. So again, if you're trying to cycle your tank or manage the nitrogen cycle and deal with ammonia, this is going to use a ton of it up as it grows. The main reason I put this above Amazon Frogbit is the roots, and as you can see here, the actual depth it takes up in your tank is very small, so there's no real restriction on swim space, which is the main negative of Amazon Frogbit, which I'll touch on now. So Amazon Frogbit is another floating plant from South America, medium growth rate, 3 to 5 centimeters length including roots, but it gets massive, it really does. Low light and CO2 demand, like pretty much everything else on this list. So this is the surface profile of the Frogbit in my tank. As you can see, a few of the leaves are damaged. I'm not sure if this is light burns or if it's because it just grows at such a rapid pace. Other leaves overlap the other plants in there and they turn yellow or brown and have issues. My honey gourami, neon tetras, and my chili rasboras love hiding underneath it. They get amongst the roots in there. When I had this in my guppy tank, the guppies would just strip the little smaller root fibers off the main roots constantly. This is the root growth for this plant, and this is 3 days after I trimmed those roots to be about 2 inches long. So 3 days worth of growth. The main root is already down to the hardscape. I cut my Frogbit every 7 days and I leave about 2 inches of root on there, and by the 7th day period there's probably about 4 inches of root there. Next up is Bacopa Compact, specifically the compact variant, not the regular one. I only have experience with the smaller variant of this plant, but it's a stem plant. It is cultivar origin, so it's not from a country. It was developed in a lab or by people splicing other plants together. Growth rate is listed as high on the official Tropica website. Mine definitely haven't grown very much at all, if I'm brutally honest, with the height being listed as 3 to 10 centimeters plus, and the plant has low light and CO2 demand. So I have 2 of these in my 12-gallon guppy tank, and this tank is cursed. Unfortunately, it's had a ton of problems, but thankfully none of them have really affected the plants much. They have had small algae issues on the plants, but I've been able to deal with that. Very easy to deal with. You just pop it into the substrate and leave it to do its thing. And finally, we have Anubias. So this is another rhizome plant that you're going to be gluing to your hardscape rather than burying. There's a ton of variants out there, with most being from Africa, but there are a few cultivars that have been lab developed now. Its growth rate is slow, and I'll definitely agree with that one. Depending on the specific Anubias you get, the height can be anywhere as high as 5 centimeters up to over 30, and its CO2 and light demand is usually low. As you can see from the Tropica website, there's an absolute ton of these available. There is some replication in here because there's multiple ways you can buy the same plant. The main reason I left this until last is because I honestly disagree with a lot of people who say this is beginner friendly. Yeah, a beginner can get this plant to thrive. This is one of the Anubias that I put into my 7-gallon, and it's definitely thriving. It's doing well. This is an Anubias Nana Petite, if I remember correctly. I actually had a second one in the same tank, and it got rhizome rot and died within weeks. And I don't mean melt, I actually mean full-blown rhizome rot. The rhizome turned to jelly, melted, and the plant just died. And I honestly think that's a common mistake I see on forums, social media, and Reddit a lot. People don't really understand that that Anubias melt and Anubias rhizome rot are different things. This is my 29 gallon and it's one of the Anubias that I had there. It's basically the remains, exact same problem. It had rhizome rot, the rhizome turned to jelly and the plant died. This is one of the other Anubias in the same tank, and as you can see it is in a little bit of a state. I honestly think this one just melted because it was the first time the plant was actually submerged in water after being grown immersed, and as you can see, plenty of new growth there suggesting this plant's fine. This is another Anubias in the same 29 gallon tank. I have no idea the specific variant of this. There is a few holes in the leaves, but I'm not actually dosing this tank with fertilizer because it's having a few algae problems right now. And here's another larger Anubias at the back of the 29 gallon tank, and pretty much the same thing happened. Yeah, one of the leaves you can see hanging down, it's transparent, but other than that, this one's thriving. Just keeps growing and growing, so I'm not sure if the issue with rhizome rot is with the smaller Anubias, but with the smaller Anubias, I honestly don't think they're beginner friendly. Over half of mine have died due to rhizome rot, where it just turns to jelly, and one of them melted, and the larger ones have 100% success rate